Welcome to Five Questions. Today we have Doug Young with us, and he's going to answer five questions related to foster care and children. And Doug works with Foster's Children's Home. And Doug, before we get into some of those questions, why don't you tell everybody about yourself?
Well, I have a background in preaching. I preached for roughly 15 years before working with two different children's homes, one in New Mexico as an administrator, and then now working with Foster's as a church relations development guy. And being in my role and traveling gives me kind of the opportunity to be able to help the local church better understand what's going on in the world of children's homes and in particular Foster's, and at the same time help the children's home kind of understand what's going on in the world of the church. The children's homes kind of live in a bubble, and it's often that they don't see outside of that bubble. And so I'm trying to help bridge a gap between the church and the children's home. And so I think knowing the language of both, having been in both the church for an extended period of time and having worked with two different children's homes in two different states, puts me in a spot where I can do that. And I do. I get to speak in a lot of different places, and I love it. And I'm appreciative of it, and I really want to help spur churches on in getting involved in children's home work.
Yeah. Yeah, and you're probably the guy to answer this first question. I'm sure there are a lot of people out there, people watching this, who are concerned about children and children without parents, children in bad situations, but probably don't know much about what's going on with our foster care system. Probably don't keep up with legislation, other things. And so, just briefly, just tell us, what is the state of foster care in 2019?
All right, so and I guess tend to focus more on Texas because that's where we live. But
Yeah.
there are 30,000 kids in Texas in the foster care system. So that's not kids on the bubble. That's not potentially under investigation. That's kids in the system. And so there is a huge foster care crisis in Texas. Uh, Across the states, there are anywhere from 450 to 500,000 kids in foster care across the nation. And so uh, there are gargantuan sized problems when it comes to this because we just don't have enough beds to satisfy uh, the need for kids. So in Texas, the system's in redesign. It's been a redesign, and so I like to think of it as almost like a semi-privatization. A single source contractor is in charge of the placement of kids based on DFPS's regions. Foster sits in Region 3B, so there are 7 counties. Uh, Erath County, where Foster sits, Johnson, Palo Pinto, Hood, Somerville, Parker, and Tarrant. 900 of the 30,000 kids in foster care in Texas are from Tarrant County alone.
Hmm. Yeah.
So it's a huge mess. So we're trying to help fill a void in that, and there are things that churches can do. There are things that individuals can do, and that's why I'm glad we're able to kind of talk about this.
Yeah, I think every church that I've been a part of has supported, a children's home or maybe two or three children's home by sending a little bit of money each month. Maybe they've collected food or something. But maybe beyond that, what are some things that churches can do and individuals can do to help out children's homes like Foster's and others?
Yeah, I think there are some obvious things. I think that given the shortage of beds, families that are maybe intrigued by the idea of creating their own ministry where they foster and or foster to adopt, that's always an option. I mean, the state's looking for people. Consequently, Foster's has an internal agency where we are training and licensing couples that live within that 7 county region to foster and to foster to adopt.
Hmm.
So there's always the opportunity for families that want to get involved and want to do that. Uh, Two, they can find ways to partner with a children's home, like Fosters or like any of the others that are across the state to get involved. Um, but I think that maybe the most important thing is to try to make it a priority. Um, I wish there was some kind of way that we could foster this very proactive concern for what's going on, because the foster care crisis in Texas or across the nation isn't really the problem. It's a symptom. And the problems are much deeper. The problems relate to the home. The problems relate to addiction and all sorts of other things. And so foster care and the problems in foster care with lack of beds and having adequate care, it really is a symptom of what's going on amongst dysfunctional homes.
Yeah.
So I'd say if we could find a way to make it a priority, we'd go a long way. A long way.
Yeah, that's good. I think most Christians are familiar with James 1:27. Religion that is pure and undefiled before God the Father is this, to visit orphans and widows in their affliction. And so, we like that verse. We quote that verse from time to time, but let's get down to the nitty gritty and what can Christians do to fulfill that?
Yeah, kind of piggybacking off of what I just said, I think thinking about children's homes, thinking about foster care in terms of being worth the time, effort, and resources. You know, it sounds cliche, but having been in the church, local work, working with children's homes, it almost feels like when it comes to this, we're kind of fiddling while Rome is burning. And I know that there are all sorts of issues about which the church is concerned. And what are the justice issues, the most pressing justice issues of the day? Everybody's got their own opinion, and we're pretty good at arguing about it. But making this a real James 1:26 and 27, particular 27, a real priority, I think is something that's kind of at the heart of the Christian mission. I mean, we're talking about the future as well as our current situation, and what are we going to do for those who are in need. These kids aren't in children's homes as a result of them being troubled problem kids.
Yeah.
They're there because there is a level of dysfunction in the home, and most of them are there at no fault of their own. People don't always see it that way, but that really is the case. So making it a priority, seeing it as an issue that's worth the time and the effort, I think is really critical.
Yeah, and I know we've got the 5 questions, but I'm going to go off track here for just a moment because I think you pointed to something really important. There are a lot of people, and specifically Christians nowadays, who are interested in what we call justice issues. And that's primarily what's on the TV. But there have always been issues with children. I mean, there's always orphans, there's always kids who need homes. And I think, at least my thoughts are, get your opinion on this, though that justice issue goes overlooked.
Well, yeah. I mean, we often hear it said, well, Jesus was concerned about the poor. And is the church really concerned about the poor? Well, these kids are some of the poorest of the poor. And so we got layer upon layer upon layer of issues here that are in play as to why these kids are in these situations. And often at the heart of it is the fact that there's the economic disparities often put them there. Single parenthood, there are economic issues related to that. So yeah, I mean, it's you can frame it however you want to, but there's justice issue upon justice issue that is attached and associated with children and foster care.
Yeah. Kind of moving on here. I want to read another verse because this is something I'm really interested in. I think it touches on what you're doing, but it's probably broader than that as well. But Mark 9:37 says, "Whoever receives one such child in my name receives me, and whoever receives me receives not me, but him who sent me." That Jesus is placing a big emphasis on receiving children here. I think that's a passage that we've missed and we've overlooked or ignored maybe. And so welcoming children, as I understand this passage, is an essential part of Christianity. In what ways have we failed or ignored this command, and what can we do better at welcoming children?
Yeah, and this maybe is really, you see it maybe even more evidently in churches that are maybe in a geographical location that's relatively close to a children's home.
Hmm.
Uh, Even more so when kids and colleges go to churches, different churches, and whatever else. But even in smaller rural communities where there are issues like this, and we go, well, how does the church feel about kids? Well, I mean, sometimes we can send some mixed messages. I was in a church not long ago where at the bottom of the bulletin it said, "Please take your unruly children to the back room," and I thought, well, that's just kind of a recipe for disaster if you're trying to get young families with kids to come to church there. But when I think specifically of kids and kids in care, I'm often thinking along the lines of stereotypes that are reinforced or enforced. Like I said, that these are problem kids, troubled kids, and it's often the case that these kids get into a lot of trouble, but uh, oftentimes they're just crying out for help. They've been traumatized, and so they're acting out in ways of trying to get some attention, to curry some favor, testing love, testing boundaries with people, and and if we just think, well, there's those children's home kids or there's those foster care kids. I mean, think about how Hollywood. I've talked about it frequently. Think about how Hollywood portrays foster care. Do you ever see anything good
Hmm.
on television when a child's in foster care? No, they're always abused. They're always abused in foster care, or there's always some neglect.
Yeah.
And look, there are bad families out there that are involved in foster care. They're doing it for money. They're doing it for unwholesome reasons. But the fact that you hardly if ever see anything positive on television about foster care and about kids in foster care, I think is telling. It's a stereotype there, and I hate to think that churches have embraced it, but I know churches that really don't want children's home kids in their services,
Hmm.
and that's terribly unfortunate. So that's not welcoming at all,
Yeah.
and that's not sending the right kind of message in any way.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, final question here. The early church was known for taking in exposed children. And if somebody who's watching doesn't know what that is, it's basically was the way ancient people practice abortion. You know, instead of having an abortion, they would just leave a child on the side of the road or somewhere just to expose them
Right.
and leave them to die. But the church came along and they began to take these children in, and they were known for that. And so my question is, what can we do to recapture the spirit of the early church and once again lead the way in helping and saving children?
Yeah. Well, I wish there was some kind of a pill that we could take that would cause us to engender hearts that are willing to do that. I mean, for some of us, it's just not in our cards.
Hmm.
I'll stand in a church and I'll generally ask, how many of you, or just raise your hand, how many of you, if money didn't matter, if maybe having your own kids at home wasn't a factor, if the size of your house wasn't a factor, or if your age or whatever else, your job, if none of that mattered, how many of you would take in kids and foster to adopt? And tons of people always raise their hands. because they understand that there's the need, but it's just not in their cards. It's not. Maybe one day it will be, but uh, they don't feel they can do it then. And I think that's where partnering with a children's home creates a situation where that can happen, where you can let us deal with licensing, you can let us deal with the headaches that come with getting multiple kids here and there, and and you can be a part of that. And I think that's why partnering with children's homes, I think, makes them more relevant than they've ever been. I often feel like children's homes today are seen as not very relevant, and I think we're more relevant than we've ever been. A foster family just simply can't take in six siblings like we did.
Yeah.
Six siblings from age 13 to right out of the hospital, living under one roof with a husband and wife as caregivers. I couldn't do that if I tried.
Yeah.
But at fosters and other children's homes, we're set up to be able to do that, and that makes us as relevant as we possibly could be. But here's the other thing, Scott, and I think maybe the most important thing to recapture this is to be informed. And there are all sorts of rose-colored glasses that people wear, and like adoption. Adoption is a great thing, and it's a biblical thing. You know, God adopts us, and so we think maybe a couple can't have kids. Maybe they're empty nesters and they feel like they have something to offer and they want to adopt a child. And if they aren't informed about the nature of these kids, then oftentimes more problems are created. 40% of our kids, anywhere from 40 to 50% of kids in a children's home, are the products of failed adoptions.
Wow.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that means that a child that falls into that percentage has now been abandoned twice. Okay.
Yeah.
Biological parents have given them up for adoption, and then the adopting parents have now placed them in a children's home. That is a recipe for an attachment or detachment issue if you've ever seen one.
Yeah.
So, why is this kind of thing happening across the country? Well, in part because people aren't informed about the adoption process, maybe trauma-informed care about the trauma that these kids have experienced, and so they think that they're gonna be welcomed by the child, and when they're not, they don't know what to do, and they throw their hands up in the air and think the only solution is to place them in a children's home. And I'm glad that we serve that purpose, but it shows, like I said, that the foster care crisis in Texas is the symptom of other problems, and there are problems in the adoption itself. So being informed about the real issues these kids are facing is crucial. And then the last thing is visit with some people. Go to a children's home. See firsthand what it's like. You can't but be changed.
Yeah.
It's just like doing short-term missions. You go to Honduras, you go to a third world country, and you experience that, and you can't but be changed by it. Well, you go to a children's home, and you see what these kids hear what they've gone through, see the kind of care they're being provided, and you can't but be changed.
Yeah.
So I think that maybe is the most important thing, is just experience it, embrace it, be open to it, and see what you'd like to do and how you'd like to help.
Yeah. Well, great. Well, I appreciate you being on here and sharing information about the foster care system and giving us a lot of good things to think about. Again, you're in church relations, so there may be some people in Texas, specifically maybe Central Texas, that want to connect with you. I guess they can find your email on the Foster's website. Is that right?
It may be on there. I haven't checked it in a while. If you want to reach out to me on Facebook, feel free to. Doug Young, I'm there. That's probably the best way. I'm probably not on, since I'm not on site and I travel. I'm probably not on the website.
Okay.
But, if you want to call, they can get you my information for sure.
Okay.
My email is doug.young@fostershome.org. So
Okay, so there it is. If you can call Foster Children's Home, get a hold of Doug, or on Facebook, or you can message me and I'll put you in contact with him. But yeah, if you're interested in finding out again what a children's home is all about, then you can talk to Doug. And if you're not in Texas, you're in another state or whatever, there's children's homes all over. So I encourage you to check them out and to get involved. Um,
Yeah, I'll come to your church. I'll visit with you. I'll visit with leadership, whomever. I'll do whatever I can.
all right. Well, thanks a lot, Doug.
I appreciate it, Scott. Thanks.